Every ship needs a captain, and every dinner needs a dinner chairman. It now gives me a great deal of pleasure to call upon our friend who's directed and steered this ship in such an admirable way. My dear friend, the chairman of our dinner, Mr. Danny Baton, to introduce Rabbi Taub.
Bishur's Rabbanim, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to briefly tell you about my introduction to the Kollel or Yosef, because it provides a glimpse into the nature of our keynote speaker, Rabbi Baruch Taub. About 9 years ago, I was in Eretz Yisrael, meeting with a Rav that I often visit there to ask for a bracha. He suggested to me that the biggest bracha would come if I increased my Torah learning. Upon leaving his office, my first thought was to call my Rav, Rabbi Taub. As usual, like clockwork, Rabbi Taub called me back within 5 minutes of my initial call, even though he was in an airport at the time, probably with many other pressing concerns. Remarkably so, this was his usual practice. Throughout many years he spent as our Rav, calling back almost immediately to see if everything was okay and if we had a shaila. After I recounted the occurrence in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Taub provided the critical guidance at the right time that would facilitate my growth in Torah and mitzvahs. He jumped at the opportunity to introduce me to Rabbi Shiner and the Avrechim at Kollel or Yosef to begin a more intensive program of learning b'chavrusa. It goes without saying the immeasurable bracha that this introduction brought. But Rabbi Taub's involvement with the Kollel goes far deeper than introductions and reveals at its heart the intellectual honesty that was the hallmark of Rabbi Taub's tenure at the Bayit. Rabbi Taub's commitment to Torah learning for his congregants not only led him to give us the right, uncompromising answers to our shaylas, but it enabled him to pursue the best course of action for the Bayit, one that would increase Torah learning in Thornhill, even though it would involve another outside organization entering his arena. As a result of Rabbi Taub's initiative, we are blessed to have Kollel or Yosef in our midst. Being around the Kollel for many years, I often hear the original Avrechim talk about what it was like when the Kollel was first started. And all of it is based around warm memories of what Rabbi Taub did to facilitate the startup of the Kollel, giving from his own personal funds to support the Kollel, giving of his own time early in the morning to coach and learn b'chavrusa with some of the Avrechim to help them adjust to the community. Having just said what I really wanted to share with you about Rabbi Taub, I can now review a few more highlights which you probably already know, but which are no less important. Rabbi Baruch Taub is the founding Rav and Rabbi Emeritus of Beit Avraham Yosef of Toronto congregation, and one of the original founders of Kollel or Yosef. Actually, it was Rabbi Taub that thought of the name Kollel or Yosef. The Bayit was established in 1981 together with the visionary philanthropist Joseph Tannenbaum. With 12 families under Rabbi Taub's leadership, it became one of the largest congregations in North America. Rabbi Taub continues to teach and lecture in Eretz Yisrael, where he now resides, and is a frequent guest scholar throughout the Jewish world. He has recently published his latest work entitled, "And the Dove Found Rest." Rabbi and Rebbetzin Taub, you should continue to see much nachas from Kollel or Yosef, the Bayit, and the Thornhill community for many years to come. I'm truly honored to be able to introduce Rabbi Taub to speak to us tonight.
Shus Morda Asra, Rabbi Korobkin. Rabbonim, Rosh Kollel, honored guests of honor, ladies and gentlemen. I wish that each of you could stand where I am standing and behold this beautiful sight of wonderful Jews gathered together to support Torah and Jewish life. There are no words that could fully capture the majesty and poetry of this moment. As Jews, we constantly live in different historical periods simultaneously. Standing here, I remember what this community looked like when I was growing up. We know and we're told what the Jewish world looked like 75 years ago. I remember what the keenest observers of Jewish life predicted back in the 50s and the 60s. This is not what they imagined. With European Jewish life destroyed and given every reason to abandon faith, and giving the inviting atmosphere of North America, no reasonable person would have predicted this moment, this community, this Kollel. Everyone in this room is a child of those who defied the premature obituaries for Jewish observance. Everyone here is in a state of rebellion against what others considered reasonable. In a culture that invests absolute primacy and authority in the individual, we choose community. In a culture that insists that the universal stands in opposition to the particular, we insist that Jewish particularism is the greatest gift to mankind. In a culture that attempts to artificially erase all distinctions, we continue to make Havdalah. In a culture that believes in absolute moral and ethical relativism, we still believe in absolutes. We study the same Gemara that our grandfathers' grandfathers studied. We know that every woman lights Shabbos candles, and when she does so, she is connected to her grandmother's grandmother and her granddaughter's granddaughter. Our existence is timeless. We are not constricted in time or place. We live in the world of Torah. We learn Torah directly from Moshe Rabbeinu, Hillel and Shammai, Rabbi Akiva, the Rambam, Rashi, the Ramah, Rabbi Akiva Eger, Reb Chaim. They sit at our table. We know them. And most importantly, they would recognize us. Hine ma tov u'manayim, sheves achim gam yachad. Eitz chayim hi lamachazikim bo, v'somcheha meushar. How wonderful it is to be at this Kollel or Yosef dinner. It is a moment of Hakoras HaTov, some very special honorees. But I want to take a moment to pay tribute and to mention to some of the people who were involved in the beginning, the genesis of this Kollel, who are not being honored tonight. Notably, Rav Elia Moshe Gross, Zichron Livracha, who was in many ways a spirit behind the foundation of the Kollel. Rav Moshe Reichman, I remember when Rebellion Moshe and I went to Reb Moshe Reichman Zal, and he asked me, tell me about Thornhill. I had to choose my words carefully. But I told him about Thornhill. And he made a very respectable donation. And as I was about to leave, he said, you know, I know that the minhag, I want to tell you two things, he said. I know that the custom is you only come once a year. Institutions only come once a year for a donation. Come as many times as you want to begin this kollel in Thornhill. And secondly, he said, I want you to go to my children. Because what I do is not the business of my children. I taught my children, as we all teach our children, that they have to grow up and do their own thing. Rabbi Avram Fruchthandler of Yeshivas Rabbeinu Chai in Berlin, so involved in the beginning of the kollel. Rav Agon Rav Shlomo Miller, behind the scenes, was very much involved in the beginning of the kollel. And our honorees, Joey Turk and Elizabeth. Jonah was, through the grace of God, Siyata Deshmaya, the president of the shul at that time, and he navigated the partnership between the shul and the kollel through moments of birth pangs, without a moment of personal agenda. Correction, he had a personal agenda. He always said, I don't understand why people wouldn't want a kollel. Harbas is Torah. People are learning Torah. And Jonah was representative of a cadre of many, many families, Bayit families, who were supportive and encouraged and involved in the development of the kollel. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Avram Zal, JT, Joe Tenenbaum, we heard so much about tonight, his yurtzeit, Schuso Yagen Aleinu, he should have Aliyas Neshama. The kollel is a natural outgrowth of his building of Torah throughout the world in general, and particularly here in Thornhill. And to Rabbi Shiner, Harav Hagon, Reb Mordechai Shiner, the Rosh Kollel, and to the Avrechim Shlita, the Choshev Rabbonim, who grace the tables of the Beis Medrash of Kollel or Yosef every day, past, present, and future Avrechim, and to their mishpachas, the Neshei Chayil, who dedicate their lives, whose dream it was to marry Talmidei Chachamim, Kollel Yungelite. I should say Achron Chaviv, but the heartbeat of the kollel at the beginning was Warren Newfield and Tali Newfield. In his elegant and majestic and quiet way, his South African way, which I have come to appreciate in the last 7 years, Warren was committed to having a kollel in this community, and there was a kollel in this community. And that's the first and last, and that's the end of the story. His leadership, his chokhmah, his generosity, and Tali's generosity created what we are celebrating tonight. I wanted to tell a story, but I was instructed by Tali and Warren that I cannot tell the story. So I'm going to tell another story. You know, we all do a lot of traveling. We've been doing a lot of traveling in the last few weeks, and we actually almost didn't make it here. I'm not going to go into that story, but a story that I might have shared with my friends in the Bayit. You know, you go to customs, and sometimes you run into problems at customs. So I was traveling once to a particular country, and when I got to customs, the customs official said to me in that country, he says, where are you from? What do you do? What do you do for a living? I said, I'm a rabbi. What are you coming here for? I said, I'm coming to deliver a speech. So he said, you know, there was a rabbi here last week who came to deliver a speech. So I said, I'm coming to correct all the mistakes that he made. And he looked at me, and he stamped my passport, and he said, I'm sure there's going to be another rabbi coming through here next week. So I want to say that the young rabbis of Kollel or Yosef are going to correct all the mistakes that us older rabbis make through their diligence, their hasmara, and their haravanya in Torah. In the 1840s and 50s, the mid-19th century, in the world of literature, Charles Dickens was churning out his books. In the world of science, Samuel Morse sent the first electronic communication from Baltimore to Washington. Morse code, which became the telephone, which became all the other things we have in technology. In the world of music, Verdi was writing his operas. On the world stage, the United States signed its first treaty with China. But in Eastern Europe, in a very small town, a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva Eger was writing and publishing a sefer, a monumental, seminal sefer. Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg was publishing the Ksav v'Kabbalah. And it was a sefer that was written to inspire the Jews in his time to recognize that the historical events that I have just mentioned and others pale in comparison to the legacy of Torah Misinai and the nexus between Torah Shebichsav and Torah Shebal Peh. And in the very first pasuk of this coming week's parsha, Haksav HaKabbalah, Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg writes, and the pasuk says, we all know the pasuk, Vayu chaye Sarah, Me'eh shana, ve'esrim shana, ve'shever shanim. Shnei chaye Sarah. Sarah lived 100 years, 20 years, 7 years, 120. Shnei chaye Sarah, the years of Sarah's life. And he asked a question. Why does the Torah have to repeat Shnei chaye Sarah, the years of Sarah's life? We can do the math. Many years ago, at my Shabbos table, I asked my little kinderlach, who are no longer little kinderlach. They're giving me great-grandchildren. But I asked one of my sons, teach the pasuk for me. So he touched the pasuk. These are the years of Sarah. He said it in Yiddish and in English. These are the years of Sarah, 100 years, 20 years, 7 years. Shnei chaye Sarah, what did he say? What do you think he said? The 2 lives of Sarah. So everybody chuckled, ha ha. But if you look in Haksav v'Kabbalah, how does the Ksav v'Kabbalah, the Talmud of Rabbi Akiva Eger, translate the pasuk? Shnei chaye Sarah, the 2 lives of Sarah. Sarah Imenu was a model for something extraordinary. Tzaddikim, people who want to live their life with meaning, live multiple existences. Don't just live one life, whether it's Ruchnius, Gashmius, Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba. But I want to suggest something else. We live in different time zones. We live Shnei Chaye Sarah. Is there anyone that sits at a Pesach Seder and doesn't think about a Zeta or a Baba or a father or a mother of a previous, when I was a child and I was at their Seder and what they did? We heard about Yurtzites tonight. Joe's Yurtzite, Bob Kaplan's Yurtzite. I have a Mechutin whose Yurtzite, his father's Yurtzite is also tonight. And he told me over Shabbos in Lakewood that when his father sings, when he sings Chasal Siddur Pesach, he remembers that his father told him before the war he was a Holocaust survivor, that he sang the same niggin of Chasal Siddur Pesach, and his Zayda told him in Poland that this niggin came from his Zayda, Chasal Siddur Pesach. Is there anyone that sits at a Seder, Pesach Seder, and doesn't think about a Baba or a Zayda in the past? We live in the present, but we also live in the past. Is there anyone that attends the bris of an enikel, of a grandson, and doesn't offer a silent prayer, a silent tefillah? Kodesh Baruch Hu, give me the strength to be at the bar mitzvah of this little yingel. We live in the present. We live in the future. We live in multiple dimensions. Shnei, Chaye, Sora. This was the thought of Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg. A brilliant thought. We live in multiple dimensions. All of us here live in multiple dimensions. I don't know how the other speakers did it, but this light is killing me. I want to extrapolate. I want to extrapolate from the Alta von Kelm. We live complicated lives. We live in the past, we live in the present, we live in the future. We go to work, we live in an office, we live in a base medrash, we daven, we learn, we work, we have family obligations. But the essence of a person is what is his anchor or what is her anchor? What anchors us? That is the challenge. Is our anchor the present, or is our anchor the past, where we come from, and the future, where we are taking our children? That's the question we have to ask. I met a Jew last week in Lakewood. His name is Avrom Mordechai Greenwald, a Munkacher Yid, an English Yid, a Hungarian Jew, 89 years old, Salon Giorin, should live and be well. He came to America after the war, and he moved to East New York. New Yorkers know East New York was not a great hub of Torah. And when he came to East New York, he went into the big shul. There was a big cathedral synagogue in East New York, and he went in. Very few people there. And he went in and he asked for a room. He wanted to start a Chevra Shas. He was a Munkacher Talmud. He was a Talmud Chacham. There were a few mirror Talmidim in East New York at the time. And he started a Daf Hayomi shir in East New York. They gave him a room. He had 3-4 people, and they learned Daf Yomi. Kumtz again, it was Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur Shechal Lios b'Shabbos. Yom Kippur that came out on Shabbos. And during the break on Yom Kippur, they went into their room, these 4 Jews, and they started to learn Gemara. In walks a Jew, a Yom Kippur Jew, a 3-time-a-year Jew, a holy Jew. But he came wandering in with his little silk tallis over his shoulder, and he came in and he said, "What's going on here?" And they explained to him that Judaism is not just about praying, it's about studying the Torah. He said, "This is very interesting. Can I join you?" "Of course." "How can I help you?" So Rabbi Avram Mordechai said, "We need a shas. We need a set of Talmud, of Gemara." He said, "No problem. Remember, this is Yom Kippur, Shechal Lios b'Shabbos." He reached into his pocket, that's right, took out a checkbook and a pen and was going to write it. And of course, they stopped him. They went to visit him. And, but so Reb Avram Mordechai Greenwald is a very smart Jew. He said, Ki me'Allah ha'aretz chamas. We heard in Parshas Noach a few weeks ago, and more recently in Daf Hayomi, the pasuk was quoted, that the world was filled with chamas, ches mem samech. So this Jew said to me in Hungarian, with his Hungarian accent, I can't really repeat it, but he said, "You know what Yiddishkeit was like then after the war in America? Chamas, ches mem samech, chamishim, machzirim, and sidirim, chumashim, machzorim, and sidurim." That was it. They didn't know what learning Torah was all about, but he showed them. 5 Siyumei Hashas in East New York. Eventually his children became Talmidei Chachamim, his grandchildren, and he moved to Lakewood to join them. Because his anchor was not in his present, but the anchor of his present was in his past and in his future. Where is our anchor? I want to tell you a story, and with that I'm going to conclude. One of the shiurim I give in Yerushalayim every week in the OU Center is a shiur on the Parsha. And every week, for the last year, a lady comes in about 10 minutes after the shiur starts in the back with a shopping cart. And nobody sees this lady, by the way, except me. Because in the shiur, the women are here, the men are here. This lady comes in, she quietly comes to the back, she sits down, opens the window. In the winter, it's too hot from the heat, she opens the window. In the summer, it's too cold from the air conditioner, she also opens the window. She says, "Sir, I don't know if she understands English." She's a really typical Israeli woman, and she comes in and she sits in the back. I never spoke to her. About 3 months ago, I was telling a story about the Chavetz Chaim. Story about the Chavetz Chaim. Reb Hillel Zaks, Einikel of the Chavetz Chaim, he found out that there was a granddaughter of the Chavetz Chaim living in Eretz Yisrael. And he went to visit her. To talk to her, a relative of his. And she told him the following story. I was going to university in Vilna. You know, in Eastern Europe, there was no Pirchei or Banos or NCSY or Bnei Akiva. It was either Torah or communism. Communism swept the Jewish world. It was a fire that swept the Jewish world, and she became a communist. And she's going to the University of Vilna to study languages. But before she went to the university, she wanted to visit her grandfather in Radin, Chavetz Chaim. So she took a train to go to Radin. There's only one problem. Radin was such a small village, it didn't even have a train station. So she stopped at the nearest train station and had to take a horse and buggy to get to Radin. And she came to her Zayda, and she went into Chavetz Chaim's house, his home in Radin. And she said to him, "Zayda, why are you living in such finster, such darkness?" She wasn't referring to the lack of electricity. There was electricity in Radin. She's talking about, the old worldliness of the Chavetz Chaim and Yeshivas Radin and our world, the old worldliness of our world here tonight. Old worldliness. Actually, the lights are a little old worldly. And the Chavetz Chaim listened to her and he said, "Come outside." He heard an airplane and he showed her there's an airplane in the sky. That airplane is flying by. One day that airplane is going to have a bomb that will have the capacity to destroy the entire world. We don't live in darkness. They live in darkness. They make airplanes, they make bombs, they make wars. We here in Radin, in the world of Torah, in your world, he said to his dear granddaughter, we make mention, we make people. Shnei Chaye Sarah. We make multi-dimensional people. That's the story she told. I told this story in the shiur. I don't remember even the context of why I told the story. I think I was discussing the greatness of the Chavetz Chaim. That the greatness of the Chavetz Chaim, Lefi Anias Daiti, according to my humble opinion, is not in what he gave us, in what he didn't give us. Where are the Chedushei Torah of the Chavetz Chaim in Shas? We don't have the Chavetz Chaim in Torah, in Shas, in the Talmud. Chavetz Chaim gave us the Mishnah Brura and all of the Sforim he wrote for Jewish soldiers and Jewish simple people, and Kochim, because he held that Kochim was important when we rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. But he sacrificed Mesiras Nefesh not to give us his Torah. Where would the Jewish world be if we had the Chedushei Torah of the Chavetz Chaim in Shas? We don't have it. But that was his Mesiras Nefesh. That was the greatness of the Chavetz Chaim, what he didn't give us. Anyway, I told the story. Shiur was over. This woman with her shopping cart comes ambling up to me for the first time. I didn't know if she understood English, Hebrew. She looked like an Israeli woman who came in to get from the protection from the cold, from the heat. The first thing she did is she corrected something I said in Dikduk from Tanakh. Then she said to me, you spoke about the Chavetz Chaim and his granddaughter. I want to tell you, that woman, Chavetz Chaim's granddaughter, was my mother. Now, I always, my whole life, wanted such a story to happen to me. And it finally happened to me. So I was a deer in headlights. And I asked her name. She told me her name is Ariella Viner. Ariella, I was named for my uncle, Rabbi Aryeh Leib, the Chavetz Chaim's son. I have a brother in in Tel Aviv whose name is Yisrael Meir. So I really asked the wrong question, but I didn't know what that. I said, is he frum? Wrong question, right? Wrong question. She said no, but all of his children are Chosrei B'tshuva. And my children are all frum. And I want to tell you that when I said, what happened to your mother? She came to, at that time, Palestine. She came to Eretz Yisrael, to Israel. And what did she do? She studied languages in the university. And the Chavetz Chaim had asked her, in that story, when after 120 years, Baruch is going to ask you, what did you accomplish for Klal Yisrael with your languages? She didn't know what to answer. So I want you to know, she said, my mother came to Eretz Yisrael, and she taught Ivrit. She taught Lashon Kodesh to Olim Chadashim, to new immigrants. So, you know, the Rambam says in Pirkei Avos, you know, that great mitzvah to teach, to learn Lashon Kodesh, Hebrew. That's what she did. Then she said, I'm going to bring you something next week. So the next week she brought me a letter Chavetz Chaim wrote. Her mother got married in Palestine, in Eretz Yisrael. And the Chavetz Chaim wrote the most beautiful, it was 1930, so the letter was written by Reb Leib and signed by the Chavetz Chaim. It was just an extraordinarily beautiful letter, which I have at home. A beautiful letter. I don't have the original. The original, by the way, would go on eBay. I don't know how much it would go for, but it doesn't matter. And he gave her a mazel tov. He apologized twice in the letter that he couldn't come to the simcha. It's hard for him to travel. But he wished her mazel and bracha. And he encouraged her to keep Shabbos and to keep Taras HaMishpacha. And I'm sure that your chosen is a very special boy because you're a special girl. And v'chula v'chula. This letter had a tremendous impact on Ariella Viner because her anchor was not the present, it was the past. With not a little bit of schus avos from her Zayda, her Alta Zayda, the Chavetz Chaim, but with her own commitment to being anchored in her past. She raised an extraordinary family, as all of us here have been zocher to do. So I just want to close with a bracha that our presence tonight is a collective declaration that our anchor in the present, is not our present, but it's our past and our future. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu continue to shower his brachas on all of us to enable us to continue to be Tomchei Torah, to support the great, grand mitzvah of Talmud Torah. May the Kol Torah which emanates from the Beis HaMedrash of Kollel or Yosef continue to inspire this entire holy community of Thornhill, Hasmucha le Toronto. Toronto, Hasmucha le Thornhill. And may the muted footsteps of Mashiach Tzidkenu become increasingly audible, allowing for the fulfillment of the words of the NOV speedily in our days. Uvo ha'ovdi me'eretz Ashur, v'hanidochi me'eretz Mitzrayim, v'hishtachavu l'Hashem b'har HaKodesh, b'Yerushalayim. Amen.